This is my Google timesheet for my clinical fellowship, and it captures my hours. So I use this spreadsheet to draft out my notes. When I'm done, I copy and paste them into my DOE system. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to use these notes that I have and pull out the relevant accuracy for each student goal and plot them here so that I can see progress over time. In addition to that, I wanted to know what the average was. So I included this section above the sheet in order to do some analysis. There's some changes to the caseload manager as well as the weekly scheduler. And finally, there is a progress monitoring tool that will allow you to select a student from this drop-down and then look at the progress since the beginning of their services. Okay, so it all starts with your caseload and your caseload manager. In these rows here, I have some brief instructions. At a minimum, what you need to start using this is the student name that you will put here in this column, the student's mandate, which you will put here in parentheses. It'll be the frequency, the duration, and the size of the group. And the reason why you're putting it in parentheses is because there's a formula here that's going to extract the frequency so that for all of your current students, that frequency will be pulled out and you'll get a total in this box here that lets you know how many notes you need for the week. It's just one way of kind of verifying that your mandates have been met. And you'll need to obviously put in the goals. This sheet only accommodates 5 speech and language goals. It has a field for you that is optional to put in the IEP service start date and the projected IEP annual renewal date. This field here is something that will allow you to highlight your sheet and let you know in advance when IEPs are coming due. So you want to be notified in, let's say, 5 days from today when IEPs are coming due. On June 12th, you have an IEP that's coming up. This will let you know that that IEP is 5 days away. If it's 11 days away, it's not going to highlight. But if it's 10 days away or less, it's going to highlight that. So that's how that works. And you have the option here of changing how you want to be notified. And if you delete it, it's not going to highlight anything. So when I expand this, we'll see all the columns that are here. This information from here through goal 5, even though you would probably want to include this too because each goal has 3 pieces to it. The full IEP goal that you can copy and paste from the IEP, the bullet points of that goal, and then the accuracy outcomes for that specific goal. So those are the pieces that are basically required for this sheet. And then you could potentially delete everything from this point on. If you're not going to need to record your IEP next upcoming date, then you don't even need this. But you can leave it and group it if you don't need to use it. But I like to be able to record my academic year, start date and end date, the school, the site. I even like to use this column here to record my actual progress report summary. Let's say I like to give myself 30 days notice when an IEP is coming due. If that student is a current student, this IEP information is going to expire. I'll need to rewrite their progress report and replace it. So how I would do that, first expand all the columns to make sure that everything is showing. I would highlight that student. I would insert a row below it. Then what I would do is I would copy that whole entire row, paste it so that any formulas that are here will carry down, and then I will expire out that first row. This information is going to go away, and now I can rewrite each of the goals accordingly. This date will become my new IEP date, give or take. And then this date is going to be, for me, it's going to be 365 days from the date of this IEP. I'm going to type new 1 of 3. just so that when I look at it on the sheets, I can kind of tell that it's a new goal. Now when I go into the CF data entry sheet and select that student, as long as this is indicated as current and not expired, you will see the updated goals. If it's expired and you want to see the goals anyway, it's going to return the first entry for that student, because that's how VLOOKUPs work. You can't return all instances. Setting it to current is always going to show you the updated version, as long as you indicate that that one is expired and here is the new one. If the mandate changes, this number will update and give you an updated count here. If I filtered this table, and hit clear and select the student that I want to see, I can see that my first service date with that student is September 16th. So in this scenario, the expired goals for the student were actually the goals that were listed here, because I just added the new one for the example. As you write your session notes throughout the school year, you can pull out the relevant data according to the goal that you worked on in the session. If you highlight all of the accuracy outcomes for goal 1, you can see that there is a total average of 68. If you highlight any given week, week 33, you get an average of 63. If you select the student that you want to see the average outcome for, this will update and show you the average since the service start date for that student. And there are 3 averages listed here for the 3 goals. If you want to see a specific week, services started during CF weeks 24 through 46, I can select a week that corresponds to this student's services. This should update. Goal 1 was worked on, but not goal 2 or 3. So that's why these are blank. If I were to look at week 31, I see that at least 2 goals were worked on. So let's take a look at that one. And now I see the average outcomes for those goals as well. If I remove the week number, this message will change, because it's no longer giving the average by week, it's giving the average since the service start date. So if this is blank, it'll give you the entire average, but if you focus in on a week, it'll give you the average for that specific week. Another tool you have here is highlighting within the sheet without filtering. So I'm going to select the student, and it's going to run a conditional format on this table. And the more entries that you have, the longer it can take. But here you see I have over 2,000 rows of information, so it's going to take a while. But once it does, it's going to highlight every service that you provided for that particular student on your sheet, so that you can just kind of take a look. And if you've entered the week number, you can see the weeks that in your CF you worked with that student. There are some situations where for the CF week, you might not be able to count it. This was really my week 7. Although I provided services in that week, I couldn't count that week because I only worked 2.5 hours. I had to leave early that day, and then I couldn't come in other days of the week. So while I still need to track the progress, because I did have sessions with those students, I technically can't count this week. Although in the end, I believe your CF employers just average everything out. So now that I have all of the entries highlighted for that student, I can look through it, and then when I'm done, I can just hit delete. And these, again, will take a while to run depending on how much information you have, and it'll clear the highlights. And now in the same way, if I want to focus in and see when my supervisor came during my first segment, I can highlight that. After your conditional formats run, you can kind of scroll through and see the instances of your supervision, because you need 6 hours. When I'm done, I can highlight these and hit delete for the drop downs, but I don't want to delete any of these orange cells, because if you click into anything, and you see a formula, like there's no formula here, but when you click into this cell, you see this formula. So you don't want to delete that. And just double check before you hit delete. Take a quick look at this bar here, and if you see something like a formula, just don't hit delete. And you can change the color pattern of anything that you want. The only thing is you just can't delete any of the formulas because then the lookups won't work. And now let's take a look at the master schedule. This is basically a copy of the section of the data entry sheet that you will add to for new hours. So how it works is once you finalize your schedule, you can come into here and fill it out. And this is information that is going to help you verify whether you have everything scheduled or if there's anything that's unscheduled. If you work Saturday and Sunday, you can leave these. I highlighted cells that have formulas in them, so you can skip those. Let's say this was a blank sheet. First thing you need to do is put in the very first Monday for the week that you need to work, regardless of the day that you start. Let's say I start on June 8th. I'll put in June 7th because I want it to calculate the dates for me. I don't want to have to enter dates throughout the sheet. I want to do it up here. Let's say I put in a Wednesday date. It's going to give me a warning here that I need to put in a Monday date. So it'll remind you if you don't do that correctly. And because I said that I started work on a Tuesday, I'll flag this as a Tuesday. And then it's going to find that date here and put it down here for me. Here are my sessions for Monday. So my first session from 9 to 9:30 has 4 students in it. These are the 4 students that are in the session. For each row, I want to show all of the students that are in the session. So I list the entire group here, and then I just copy and paste it down. And then that group size is 4. So I put 4 for all of the instances here. In terms of how to count the hours, make sure that one instance of that group is showing yes to count, so that this will show up in the header. So it's 0.5. If I did yes for each one, then it's going to start adding on another half hour for that session, but that's not accurate. So that's how that works. What this side of the sheet is going to do is it's going to bring in your caseload from the caseload manager for everything that you flagged as current. This table here to the right is completely for display. You can change the format by changing the color scheme if you want, but the contents of it, all of it is formulas. And what it's going to do is as you add a student name here, it's going to count how many instances of that student is on this list here. So you see when I deleted him, it changed it to 1 instance on that table. So now he's unscheduled. If I put that student back, it becomes scheduled. Because this particular student needs to be seen twice a week, it's going to look at how many times you have that student listed here, and it's going to look at how many frequencies that student requires according to the mandate, and it's going to pull out that number here, and it's going to do a quick check between the two. And so you see, if you scan down here, you'll see that this student is unscheduled. I need to pick the correct mandate, and I see according to here, the unscheduled mandate is the individual mandate. This field is optional, but I'm going to just rewrite the student's name anyway. And this is a one-on-one. If I were to make a mistake and add another student to the sheet, I can look, and not only is the student unscheduled, but there's a duplicate. So if I take out that duplicate, the note goes away. Now let's say that I had an error somewhere else. What I could do is, rather than looking through all this, which can be a little bit time consuming, I can see that that student name is David G. I can select him from the drop down, and what the sheet will do is, as long as there's one instance of that student in the table, it will highlight, and I can see that I need to schedule 3 meetings with this student. So I have 1 here, 2 here, and that's it. So I'm missing one. If I put him here, if I put him there, the error is cleared away. Then if I delete this here, the highlighting will go away as well. Now I can see that I have 15 hours billed, and this is showing me how those hours are broken up. 4.5 Monday, 4 hours Tuesday, and so on. 0 hours on Friday. The only row you cannot delete is this first row, and the reason why is because there is this formula that is populating the entire sheet. If you were to delete it, the whole thing will go away. So I'm going to hit undo and bring back my information. Another thing I like to do is count the number of active students I have on my caseload. This way I can judge my workload at any point during the academic year and decide if I'm able to accommodate any new students. So I inserted a column here to show the number of students in the header using this validation table here. It's going to sum and total the number of students that I have. If students have multiple mandates, they're going to be listed in here multiple times. This student, number 8, actually has 2 mandates, but you see that the count is only showing once. In addition, you have this table here. It will list by day the number of notes that you need to complete, which is equivalent to the frequency of mandates that you provided services for on that day. So the total number here is going to also be shown here. After creating this section here for viewing student goals, I thought it would make a lot of sense to bring that function into the scheduler, because every week you're going to come in here and copy and paste this information anyway. So I thought it would be good to add a column here so that when you're in here, you can actually view the student's goals for the current IEP. You could potentially plan out a simple idea here, and then when you copied and pasted your work for the week into the CF data entry table, and then pasting the values, that lesson idea comes in as well, but the links got lost because of the pasting of values. So perhaps when you're done, and if you have any content in here that have links to them, you can highlight that one column in a second step and come back and actually just paste without using this clipboard. You could number it as well before you bring it in, so that as you're coming back into the sheet to write your notes for the session, you don't have to recall the student up here to remember which goal number this was, so that when you put in your data point for the outcome of that particular goal, reading comprehension is goal 1. If you needed to, you could relook that up and find out which goal number that was so that you're putting in your information in the right spot. So this has been added to the weekly schedule template. And if you don't want to use that, you can group it. And I just moved the message here that if there is no date, this is going to let you know and everything will clear out. So that's a different formula. I forgot to mention that you can also enter the start time of your session. And this formula here will look at the duration that you've selected here, whether it's 5, 10, 30 minutes, and it will calculate the end time of each session that you enter here. If none of these durations are appropriate and you need something that's different, you can just enter the actual end time here and overwrite the formula. So now that I put all of the information into my schedule and my hours are validated, all the session mandates are met, and there are no duplicates in the sheet, if I know in advance that my supervisor is going to observe me, I can come back into the sheet at the beginning of the week so that when I paste the information into the data entry sheet, the supervision entries are there. The easiest way to do it would be to select the supervision at the bottom of the sheet and then indicate what day the supervisor is coming. Let's say they decided to come on a Wednesday. The sheet will populate the date for you. You can indicate the time frames that supervisor is going to be there. You want to count that toward your CF hours. And then when you bring in that information for the week, highlight column C through L from the very first row of your information and ignore everything here. If you have session plan data in here, you'll need to come back in for a second step. Here we're going to take a copy of that at the beginning of the week and then go into the next available row and paste the information as values using this clipboard here. And then you're going to wait for the formulas to calculate.
Working.
And there goes the updated information. I can copy the whole entire week number so that this has a reference to the CF week number. My CF hours in the summary have gone from 3.10 hours of supervision in segment 2. 2 hours have been added to that, so now it shows 5.10 hours. That information is updated as a result of this entry here on the data entry sheet, and this is for week beginning 6/14. If I double check up here, I can see that my direct hours for segment 2 should say 15. And if I wanted to see if there were any supervision hours in that week, and I see that there are 2 hours, and the week number populated because I have that there. And so my hours are validated there. Now, if I were to go the following week and add a new week of information, this is no longer applicable, so I can delete it off of the table without affecting the side because there's no information that's over here that would interfere. Just be aware that the blue highlighted fields have separate formulas in them. But if your supervision entry was at the bottom like mine was, then it was okay for me to just delete it. If you're unsure, then what you could do is just go into each cell and hit delete. As long as you see that there's a formula, don't delete that item and just go through each cell, look to see if there's a formula and just skip that. I actually hard-coded this ending time, so now the formula is not there. But if I were to go in the cell above it and copy and paste it in this cell, it's actually going to replace. So it depends on your skill level with Excel or Google Sheets and knowing whether or not there's a formula in the cells and how to copy and paste those formulas if you lose them. So here we're going to see that the formula is there because I didn't delete the whole entire row. And I can change these highlighted colors by resetting it. Now, this is the following week. Everything should update in this little table here, and all of the dates should update again. And now that week is concluded. I'm going to come in, assuming that I don't know any other changes, I can come in and copy that information back into my data entry sheet in the next available row again as values. Wait for the formulas to run. I can, in the meantime, indicate this is week 48. Find the last row for that week, paste the week number there, and I'm still waiting for these calculations to finish running. And then my hours are updated, and so any direct hours that are listed here should now be brought into the summary. And I went from having 92 hours left to 62. And now we'll take a quick look at how to validate your sessions for the week and check on your hours. And in the data entry sheet, you can expand this new section here, which will validate your hours for the week. So if I were to pick this current week, my hours would update to show, based on the segment that I'm in, 15 hours, which according to the scheduler matches. Sometimes when you have to cancel sessions or move session times around, the mandates can get messed up. This is just a separate check that you can use to make sure that everything is okay. Now, if I've been using my CF week numbers and I put in week number 47, this will update and show that this 614 is for week 47. These are the only two cells that you need to change for this whole section here. If you want to see any indirect time that you have on your schedule that you've just pasted in here, you would select that. I have 0 here. If you wanted to see any supervision that you've inserted into this section, you can select that, as well as any mentoring. If there is nothing there, you'll see zeros, and this section will be blanked out. But if you want to see your direct hours, it will readjust the totals and show you how many mandates that you have on this section. In the next sheet, you have progress by student, where you can select the student from a drop-down menu. And for each of the goals for that student, the accuracy you've entered in the data entry sheet will be populated here, and it'll also transfer that information to a consolidated chart. So I went back after creating this and only populated 2 students, and that's why I say it's easier to do this as you go, but I created this after I created my notes. So in selecting the student that I have accuracy data for, it's going to look at what I've selected here, and I want to see the current goals. So this is going to affect what gets populated here, because these are the current goals listed in the caseload manager. The sheet is going to filter the data that's in the data entry sheet and show me all of the session dates for this student. So even though I began my CF earlier than September 2019, this is when the student was added to my caseload. And he has 3 goals. These are blank because he doesn't have 5 goals. His goals are entered here. And to see what goal 1 is, you refer over here. He doesn't have 5 goals, so I need to hide these columns in order to get those goal descriptions off of this chart. But for now, I'm going to keep it displayed. And if you expand this section here, you can then have the option to select a service date range for this student. As an example, if this student was added to my caseload and then a couple of weeks later I needed to write an IEP for him, I could potentially consider this part his old IEP. Let's say I wrote his progress report on October 1st. So if I were to put in October 1st in this field here, I need to also put an end date, because then this is going to give you a warning. So it needs an end date. You can put in today's date if you wanted to. So I put in an end date and this message clears away. So now the table adjusted to show me the outcomes for the date range that I've selected, and his services go through March 11. And if we take a look at the chart, we see that date range that I requested is on the chart. You also have the option of changing this display here to a column display. This view could be in contrast to the view that's on your chart if you wanted. This section here is working with this grouped section, which you don't need to print, but it's here so that if you needed to change any of the fields here, let's say you didn't want the minimum and maximum value set at 0 to 100, you can come in here and change it, and it would apply to each of the sections that you change. And when you make a selection here, it's going to affect the information that's here and changes it there. So here is a hidden column that is going to pull in the week number based on the session date, just as another piece of information for you to do analysis on. If you don't need it, just group it up. This side of the chart has just some general information. You can put in the date of an IEP meeting, print this out, and change all of the pertinent information here, put your name there. If you wanted to print this, you would have to collapse these columns. You can do that by hiding them, and then that would display the correct information for the goals here on the chart. If you want this report to show all of the session dates for this particular student, then you need to group this column here. But if you want to show a specific date range, you have to include this section when you print, so that you're not printing in color. You can change it to black and white, however you want to display your information. That's up to you. But if you were to click in a cell and see a formula, as a reminder, you shouldn't delete. There is no formula in this cell, but this cell below it is actually using this wording, goal 1, to locate goal 1 in your caseload manager. So the only thing that you really need to change in this sheet is the student's name, whether you want a line or a column display. any of the information that's on this side of the chart, these fields here. And if you wanted to edit the scaling of the display of these charts here, you would need to edit this information as well. So those are the fields that can be changed. I'm going to clear the range by deleting these two dates, and you'll notice that all of the text descriptions around it will change because it's been cleared out. And now because I don't have a date range, the session dates that are displayed represent all of the session dates for this particular student. When you click on this cell and you hit delete, the table is going to reset completely and show you only the session dates that you have on the table, but it's not going to show you any information for any student because no one is selected at this time. And it's running a lot of formulas, so depending on how much data you have in your sheet, it can take a while, so just be patient. Now we'll take a look at the data collection template. So if you want to reuse this sheet for data collection purposes, set everything up in this template and then duplicate this sheet. And how this sheet works is it's fully explained in the tutorial shown here, but in this file, it's taking the data from your caseload manager. So for example, if you have a student here, let's say this one, where you didn't put all of the 3 goals, see how this is blank and this is blank, when you select that student from your drop down here, it's not going to populate the information because the caseload manager is blank. So this information is only as complete as what you have in your caseload manager. So if you're missing information, it's not going to be able to bring in something that's not there. So after making a copy of the template, I can set up my schedule based on what my caseload is for Monday. So I can select a student here. And then I can set my start and end time for that student based on my schedule. And if he's in a group of 2, I can indicate that. And then the information is going to be calculated. Since he's in a group of 2, I can include another student. And so those 5 goals are pasted in here. I did them in a different kind of format where I put the skill type as the header. You can set up your goal description in the caseload manager however you want, using bullets, using a description like this. So I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. And I always come back and have a blank version of it here. There's now a provider level dropdown that will allow you to switch the usage of this timesheet from your undergrad observation hours, graduate clock hours, into your clinical fellowship, and then into your Cs. And how this works is if you are an undergrad or graduate student, you would select the provider level and leave it there, and then just do your entries on the sheet. And selecting this provider level up here, which is editable in this tab here, these are your 3 drop downs. Clinical fellowship will stay the same basically. In undergrad, you would have the 9 areas of language, which you can edit here. Or if you're a licensed SLP, you can continue to use a sheet and just log in your sessions, as well as your meetings, paperwork, and things like that. Click this to go back to the sheet. Once you set the provider level at the top here, the activity column will then change and pick up the relevant activities that are assigned in the drop downs tab. You can change the provider level to clinical fellow as you move throughout your career, and then this activity will then change to your clinical fellowship segments, and you can log in your information that way. And then once you become a licensed SLP, you can even continue to use this and log in your direct and indirect session times if you wanted to. And the benefit of that is you can track student progress and then chart the outcomes. If you're a CF, your hours will be summarized in this tab by segment. And if you're an undergrad or a grad level student, all of your entries will be consolidated into this cover sheet based on your data entry here. So it would look like this. You would enter the area of language, the site or the course name. You would enter whether it's a treatment or diagnostic. your date and your start and end time, flag it as a yes so that you can calculate the hour. And then this column here will be added up and brought into your 400 hours tab. Enter the course name here, any of the relevant information here, whether that course is an observation course or if I'm actually providing services. The entire sheet, except for this side here, is all formulas. Let's enter some more observations. This course here is an observation course. And go to the next available space and copy that course name here. Don't just copy and paste it. Wait for this clipboard and then select paste values. You would enter a date for the service, a start and end time, and just hit yes here. It's going to calculate the duration of that session that you observed. You're going to need to indicate whether it's a treatment observation or diagnostic, and say it's a treatment, and the area of language that you observe. If the one observation time frame was multiple areas of language, what you could do is tag the next area of language that was observed and just copy that and paste however you want to distribute it so that you can come up with a grand total of the 2.5 hours that you observed. Observation or clock hours are not indicated in this sheet. When you go into your 400 hours summary, you would flag that as observation or clock. If you don't want to call this clock hours, you can change that here and enter direct or however you want to name it. And then once you do that, you have to just make sure that these activities here match. Otherwise, it's going to give you this error message. So now I have to change it from clock to direct, or I could just copy and paste it. This way, all of the formulas that are running can actually look for the hours here and pull them in from the data entry sheet and separate them according to the Ⅎ𝗵𝗃 areas that are listed here. The Ⅎ𝗵𝗃 descriptions that are showing here can be edited by going into here, and then it's going to show you where you need to edit. So if I wanted to call it articulation/phonology, make that change and then go back to your sheet here. It's not going to find it if it is not an exact match to what you have in the data entry sheet. So make sure you set this up before you start. And see how it's saying that it's an invalid entry? Change it to the /. And now it's going to start entering the hours here because there's a match. So let's say this is my very first semester and I have this one observation hour here. I could print this out and then have my supervisor sign it. If your supervisors or professors wanted to see the entries for that, you can go into here and then just highlight your table and then do a print out of just that selected area. And then you can print out the section. As you continue to add experiences onto this data entry sheet, you'll probably need to filter this table to show just the entries that you need signatures for. And you can create a filter and then only show that specific clinic. In your summary tab, you will see a running history of all of your coursework. And so if you're up to the early childhood clinic where you have direct hours, you'll see that the total here is pulled in from the data entry sheet. And you would print out this as a cover sheet for the supervisor to sign. And you would also have a printout of the daily entries in your data entry tab that you can print to go with the sheet that gets signed off on. And so let's take a look at this section here. What you have are the 9 areas of language. It's going to total all of the hours for diagnostic and treatment under this area of language. Then it's going to break out the hours to show how much was treatment for either observation or direct hour, and how much was diagnostic, observation, and direct. So if there's nothing there, it's going to give you a little 0. And then this is going to be a total of both observation and direct. So you're getting a bunch of different totals here. So if I were to highlight all of these, I'll get 1750, which shows here. Just treatment I'm going to highlight those, and it's going to give you 13.5 total. Diagnostic, it's going to give you a total of 4, and that's how it works. Across here on this side, you're going to get your grand totals. So for treatment, it's going to add up this orange row and show that there's 4.5 hours in treatment, all of the areas of language. And then the direct hours here are 56 for treatment for all of the areas of language. For diagnostic, it's going to do the same thing and sum all of the observations for diagnostic and all of the direct hours for diagnostic and give you your totals here. And then this is going to add both of these up, and this is going to add both of these up. And so your real full total is all of that. And that matches this here. And I'm just going to add a new formula that's going to add everything up. And we'll put that over here. And so that's going to be your grand total of hours for everything. So you need 400. 25 hours needs to be in observation over here on the orange row. And the remaining needs to be in direct hours here, which will go there. And then you need a total of 400. And that's it. There you go. I've always been pretty bitter that there were no data tracking tools that seemed to be available. And after creating this template and other resources, I can kind of see why, because it's very, very complex. And you need the resource that you're using to be dynamic because IEPs change, goals change, and all that stuff. So I just want to put that out there that if this looks confusing, there's a reason for it. I know that there is a lot of detail and that there is some level of Excel or Google Sheets that you need to know in order to use this. So if you fall into that category and you can use it, that would be great. But otherwise, if you're just interested in seeing how complicated this process is, then at least you've gotten that much out of it, I hope. With that being said, thank you so much for watching.